And it is Friday afternoon, 12 p.m. Eastern Time. And what does that mean? It's time for another episode of the CVC Home Service Success Network. And just like every week, we're trying to bring you a topic, a subject that should be of interest, we hope, to you. And we got a special guest on us with us today. He's going to talk about some personal experiences with exactly the topic we're talking about. So our guest today is a gentleman by the name of Clay Lamb. And we interviewed Clay about 2 years ago, and he told a lot of the details of his story and what happened on that fateful day some years ago when he got that distressing phone call. But today, our topic is going to be more about how are you prepared as a manager, as an owner? If your phone rings one day and all of a sudden, you have to face the chaos, the confusion of this happening. So, like I said, this was an event. It was a tragic event, very tragic of what happened. And Clay, can you start off by giving us a quick synopsis of what happened that day and what did it feel like to you when you got that fateful phone call?
Well, that's a tough one to answer real quick like that, Jerry. But, I hope no one ever has to go through something as traumatic as, although we've just had one in our own industry. It's pretty serious. When it happened, I was not on the job site, Jerry, as you well know. Uh, the serviceman came to my house to pick me up. We went to the job site, but we were directed right to the hospital. And he was in the hospital at that time. He had been electrocuted by a line that was buried in the trees. And as we discovered, it was a fog that carried the energy through the air, hit the guy on the very top that was holding some scaffolding. It jumped from the wire over to him. He did not touch the wire, went down the scaffolding, hit the guy on the bottom, and it killed him immediately.
Yeah, it's a terrible, terrible thing. But today, this is one of the challenges, I think, which is for managers, for owners to get their employees to use the safety equipment that's been provided and the training that's been provided. And I know this because when I go into the field, I see a lack of use of the safety devices that are out there. It's like we feel like we're invincible. We feel like it's going to happen to someone else. It's not going to happen to us. And this is an alarming thing, Clay. I'm finding that the vast majority of accidents are not happening to new people in the industry. They've been in it for a number of years, a number of years. And what's happened is they have become, they just think it's not going to happen. They don't need to do it. They think it's ridiculous or whatever. So, like I said, I just posted a link to the last interview with Clay, and I'd strongly suggest that you go listen to this interview because it will tell you the deep down details of how this happened. Because actually, when we interviewed Clay, we found out what went on, and I actually added this into the book that we wrote when Robbie and Murphy and I put together the book for Safety for the Service Technician. We added this in because, to be honest with you, I was unaware that fog could be a carrier of electricity like what happened on this case. So do some research, listen to that previous broadcast. So Clay, let me ask you this to start off, then we're going to go around the room. But what did it feel like to Clay when you got that phone call? What was going through your mind as you got that call and you got to the hospital and found out what had happened here and what the end result was?
Well, it's a good question, Jerry, because you go through so much into your brain. I got to get to the hospital. What am I going to do? What about the people at the job site? Was there other things I didn't know about? And I knew that OSHA would be there soon, right for the ambulance. I was empty. I was on empty and almost walking in a shadow. I didn't know what was going on around me. I wasn't incoherent like that, but I wasn't thinking right. I didn't have a plan in my head where to go with this, nor do I know if I really would have followed it. I'm not so sure, Jerry, because it wasn't in my hand. But I would tell people today, you need a war plan. You need some kind of a plan when and if this happens. And it's not just to a fatality. It could be somebody that lost an eye, lost a limb, somebody that's in very bad problems right there. So it goes a long way because you've got to react. And you as a leader of your company are the one on front and center. And you're the one that's going to go through the questions, the answers, to all the people from OSHA and workers' comp. Remember, they're two separate bodies too.
Yeah. And so, did you have friends? Did you have mentors that you could reach out in this time of tragedy? You were a member of a mixed group at that time, and I used to be in the same mixed group.
Mhm.
So, did you reach out to the people in your mixed group? Were people able to assist you?
I didn't have anyone that had the experience that I was having. I didn't have anyone to reach out to. And it's interesting you said that, Jerry, because last about 2 weeks ago, Chris, I guess, Terrosi, I guess he's in Kansas. He had a guy impaled on a fence and he called me. And I guess he must have talked to Jim Brewer and he asked me, what do I do? And I had 3 questions. He reminded me of my 3 questions. I said, is the guy alive? I said, where is the guy? He said, he's in a hospital. I said, wasn't more of a question, it's more of a directive. Call your attorney now. And he hung up the phone and he called the attorney. And that helped him a lot. But I'll say this, Jerry, of most people I've ever met, he was the most orderly, and he still is the most orderly person I've ever met on OSHA standards, the meetings, the equipment, the paperwork, everything there. Tell me some really interesting things we'll talk about later on. But Jerry, when the OSHA people went through his truck, it was shocking to what they wanted. Unrelated to that incident, but they wanted to know, was it on the truck? And it looks like they were looking for something. I guess to build fines and penalties and stuff like that. Remember, OSHA is a drowning industry by itself, and it needs money, and it's going to get money. And penalties doesn't fix problems; they just penalize you.
Yeah. So, Josh, I'm going to go over to you. What would you ask Clay? What would you want to know that could help other people that could be faced with this tragedy? I think one of the things that I just heard was when this happens, you need to consult legal advice now, not later, so you know how to proceed, because you're going to be thinking erratically. There's also going to be, cannot get in to see this individual in the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
I had a client that had an employee fall, and when they went to the hospital, they would not let him see his own employee. So you got to be aware. So, Josh, what would you ask Clay?
Well, my like going back to your first question, do you know why they wouldn't let him see him? Was that for liability, or was it just because he wasn't family?
Because he wasn't family. He wasn't family. That's why they would not let him in to see him.
Okay. I've had workplace injuries before, and in the heat of the moment, you can't think straight. So we personally created a whole file just on how to deal with those, and it's a digital file. Did you create anything like that afterwards on how to handle what level of injuries versus cuts versus obviously more serious injuries?
If you're asking me, Josh, and first off, I think it's a good idea what you just said, to have an action plan of what to do. I did not have that in place. Did I create more documents? I created so many documents, it was ridiculous. But trying to get that implemented was really important. But the most important thing, I think, if you have an injury, that your team should be well aware that you really care about their safety. You care about them going home to the family. Does your company have that as a philosophy, a core value? If they don't, it's darn well better to get going and fixing it, because it could work against you. And I'll say this, Josh, anything you can and say will be used against you, not just in a court of law, but by the investigators of OSHA workers' comp.
The other thing is, I know from rebuilding chimneys, so many times the power company just wants to throw a blanket over it and call it a day. But I believe the OSHA standard is 10 feet from your work area.
Correct.
So it's important to stand up to the power company. And I know of chimney companies that'll just throw a blanket over the lines and remind them that no, it is 10 feet.
It's 10 feet, and my question is, are the employees comfortable on working on that scaffolding setup? Do they feel comfortable? And I don't want them around power, and I would tell the customer, we can bring a generator and de-energize the house and plug the refrigerator in or run it from the neighbors, whatever you want to do. But we can't have hot wires run around our service people, especially with that much scaffolding metal.
Yeah. Or ladder or chimney liners hanging off your back. And
very good.
it doesn't take anything but for forget a second, arc that liner, and next
Boy.
thing you know, it's made contact.
Yeah. So Cheryl, what about you? You participated the last time that we interviewed Clay. You know, it was a very emotional interview, folks. Just to be honest with you,
For
I had
all of us.
I had been after Clay for a number of years to tell his story, and finally got him to tell the story of exactly what had happened, and that's what we went through last time. But again, today we're dealing with
Jerry,
how.
I
Yeah,
want to stop you, Jerry. I want to thank you publicly for doing that, pushing me to do it, because it wouldn't have come out. I wouldn't have been so open as I am today, because there's something buried inside, but it was time to help the industry put a real serious face in this industry. And we've had some really tough situations in this last month that were devastating to hear about. So,
yeah. But but Clay, it only took me 10 years of prodding and poking to get you to tell your story. You know what I'm saying?
I think you're not counting right. I think it's closer to 20.
Okay. So anyway, Cheryl, you participated in this last interview with Clay, but today we're talking about the toll it took on him as an owner, as a manager. So what questions would you ask Clay in this regard?
Well, before I ask the question, I'd like to comment on something that's happened this week. 3 different interviews I've had the interviewee asking, are there safety protocols in this company?
Wow.
And I mean, you get it once in a while, but 3 times the same week that I'm talking to you. So the employees, I've got 3 of them quitting companies and looking for others because their company's not safe.
Wow.
And I'm so glad to be able to tell them the chimney industry is moving in the direction of safety. Now, I need validity. Do you see, as we're going into this, that you're seeing more of the chimney service companies picking up on their safety equipments, and the fact that they're making sure their people use them?
Well, it's interesting you brought that, because one of my last questions, I even wrote some things down here. I have a question for listeners. What do you do with an employee that refuses to wear a harness, a hard hat, or eye protection? That's my question. What do you do with an employee? And I'm talking to every owner of a business that has 1 or more employees. What do you do in that situation? And that's open for a big discussion, how you deal with that. It can't be a threat. It's got to be a promise. You've got to deal with it. This is your house. This is your family. This is your livelihood. It's their livelihood, their family, their house. So if I answered your question, I think we're going to see a big, big turn, not only because of what's happened to our industry. OSHA is going to put the squeeze on our industry, I believe, because we had one gentleman fall off who was impaled, and he laid in the hospital. He's just coming out now, but he won't be walking around for a while. And the other gentleman was killed, and we know that. And I think, God rest his soul, but that employer's got to know what to do, but other employers got to make some tough decisions. But you just can't mouth it. You just can't talk it. You've got to walk it, because your employees are looking, just like you said, Sharon. I think it's very pertinent what you just said. Those people are calling about their company, not reinforcing those things. That's a wonderful statement you made, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah. Cheryl, does that cover your question completely?
It does. The only thing else I would like to stick in right here is, are we seeing more older employees, and I don't mean age-wise, more older employees or newer employees that are doing it? Because I see a lot more people that have been in the business a while. They get too lax on the safety because they're okay. Do you agree?
I totally agree with you. I totally agree. I know myself. I know where I was 20 years ago. I know my heart. I didn't have it as my main core value. What I had on my wall was a platitude. But was I talking about that? Was I checking the trucks? Was I asking about that? Was I reinforcing, get off the rooftop? You don't have a harness on. No, I wasn't. And I was guilty as charged. There's no doubt about it. But that was, I've been out of business 2 years now. So, but I would tell anybody, you've got to be serious. But I would now put what you just said, Cheryl, that your employees will have a right to leave you if you don't care about them. I think it's really important. But again, I'll say, it's not a threat. It's got to be a promise that you're willing to lose your best employees if they won't follow line step the way it's safe to run your company, right job site, and what's going on.
Thank you.
So let's come from a different aspect, because a lot of people may not realize this. But Clay, let's address two types of toil that took you. Number one is the emotional toil of going to sleep that night knowing that someone in your employ had lost their life. That's a tremendous emotional strain. I can't even, it's like losing your parents. Until you lose a parent, you can't understand it, or a child, or whatever.
Right, Jerry.
But the other is the financial toll that it took on you personally. Because a lot of times we think, hey, we've got workers' comp or whatever. But there was a heavy financial toll put on you from this. So can you address both of those, both the emotional and the financial penalty that you took from all this?
Sure, Jerry. And let me tell you, I think the emotional doesn't go away. You may have a degree of disseminating over the years, but it's still in your heart. I wake up and I still think about the people that were involved with me that day, that week, that month, that year, that term. I'm almost 7 years. What went on, the conversations I had. And I try now to spin them that they're helpful to another operator, another company. And Jerry, I can't tell you how many, I know how many questions you get asked. I get asked, people call me and ask me, what do you think? What do you do? And I think this, and I thank you so much, Jerry, for doing this follow-up. I think it's a good way. It's a good follow-up on what we need to do as an industry and get serious again about it.
Yeah.
And I guess the next thing would be what it cost me financially.
Yeah, financially, because like I said, you're not going to be covered by your insurance. This is going to be personal things. In fact, I think that you shared that there were actually criminal charges that were considered against you at this time, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, Jerry, you're right. It wasn't a criminal, but it was wrongful death lawsuit. And it was spinning hard and heavy at me. And that was, I got subpoenaed served. It wasn't that I was going to jail, but I was going to lose everything if I could figure it out. But essentially, after all it spilled out to be, Jerry, as you well know now today, Duke Energy, which was the carrier at that time of our power in Cincinnati, finally settled out of court with the ocean and this lawsuit. It settled everything. But because I was totally dismissed of everything. But that's after the fact. That was after, a $50,000 workers' comp increase, after my insurance had been dropped, after I had mutiny on my ship with employees, after I was utter chaos going to attorney's office and doing depositions and paying for the depositions used against me. And just the conversation of missed opportunities. I guess that's the best way to say it. There was a lot of things you didn't. Jerry, if you put a number with it, yeah, I'm sure it was 400,000 or more. And that's wrong. It's dirty feels to say that, but that's money that had to come out either in time or not working or people or insurance or fines. But it isn't pretty. And anybody that goes through it, my heart bleeds for them because I know how painful it will be. And it'll be that way for quite a while.
That's it. And like I said, you can pay, you can pay the fine, you can pay the money and move on. Does it interfere with your retirement plans and everything else? You better believe it does.
You better believe it does. You take 400 grand out of your life and say goodbye. Start cashing things in. Think, where am I going with this mess?
Right. But you can never put that emotional turmoil aside. You're going to wake up in the middle of the night. You're going to remember this. And going down the road, I'm sure it hits you out of the blue, just like any other loss in your life. It's almost like there's a void that hits that's never going to go away.
Every time you hear the term workers' compensation or OSHA, it all triggers again. It's like an explosion in your brain. What's going on?
Okay. So what's it like whenever you read that another injury or fatality has happened? Let's take it when Jim Brewer had the fatality. Well, it embarked Jim on a training people to prevent that from happening, which was the big driver. I can still remember when Jim was speaking the first time of that. It was Aileron at a Saber Systems event. And I remember speaking to Jim and encouraging him at that time to tell his story just like I did you, because telling these personal stories are there. But like I said, that emotional turmoil, that pain that you go through, that vision of what you know, You look at that family that's missing a father now, and you say, no, whether you were responsible or not, you're going to feel a tremendous responsibility to that moment. So it can just strike you down. So, Josh, is there anything you would ask Clay in this discussion today?
I'm sitting here thinking about it. I was like, oh, thank God I never had in 20 years that serious of an injury. We've had car accidents and I think one broken arm and our fair share of cuts. I know it weighs. It'll never go away. I think it starts on the very first day someone comes to work for you, the culture of safety.
Amen.
And handing them their PPE gear, day one, is the most I can say about that. Helmet, cut resistant gloves, all that. We used to hand it right to them in a bag, glasses, hearing protection, all that, and it all starts on day one. And then it also involves for us, me and my service manager would randomly show up we would time it. We'd be on 2 job sites in 2 different parts of the city.
Gosh.
So they couldn't call the other guy and say,
good call.
Troy's making his runs.
Yeah.
So, and enforce it.
Yeah. But Josh, you just hit a key thing that I think a lot of people miss on. We're not doing job site evaluations a lot. We have people that are going to homes. And one of the things that I think can help tremendously is to do this spot checking, just showing up out of the blue. And I'll be honest with you, there's other things. I used to do something, people may consider it sneaky, but I would park down the street and take binoculars and watch my guys from a distance to see what they were doing. That might not sound real ethical or whatever, but at the same time, I wanted to see what they were doing. It's also observing your documentation. Are you observing them wearing their safety harnesses? It drives me up the wall to see somebody post a picture of doing something really dangerous and stupid on social media. You see this, they're posting their pictures. I can remember people that would do that, and it's like, do you have a death wish or what? And you're publicizing this out to the world. And they're doing this on their personal Facebooks and also on company Facebook pages at times. Cheryl, what about you? What else does this discussion bring up in your mind?
A lot, but nothing that I think is pertinent to this. I just want to, at this point, tell Clay how much I appreciate him for bringing his story out, because without people like you that are willing to tell how it really felt, I'm afraid a lot of other people are not going to get on the bandwagon of safety.
Cheryl, it brings you to a good point. It's pretty much what I said before. It's really not saying it's not a problem. It's not a threat. It's a promise. It's a reinforcement of the core value. It's about safety. It has a depth description to what it is. It's checking the bags, what's in them, checking the sheets, are the chemicals covered there. And I'm talking about water repellent. I'm talking about silicons. And that's what Chris just told me. So they went through and they were looking for paint and everything, MSDS sheets on this. I think they changed the name, but they're not allowed to call them MSDS sheets anymore. But those things were not, he had to work for to get them. I can remember them asking me for a tool notebook. I had no idea what a tool notebook was. And as I recall, the last time I spoke to you, I said, would you give me till Friday? It was Monday. Would you give me from Friday to Monday to look up all my receipts? And I went through about 1.5 years, 2 years of receipts, invoices, rentals, and getting rid of tools. They wanted to see that document. I'd never heard of one before. And everybody I've ever spoken to had never heard of anything like that. But it was required by OSHA to have that book, that binder, that told what you rented, what you repaired, what you replaced, and what you removed. And it's crucial. Again, there it goes, demonstrating that you're serious about OSHA safety. Workers' comp is all predicated on what's going to happen into the fines. Fines and penalties are coming. And you know they're looking for everything, even unrelated to that incident.
Yeah. And there's also out there today, Clay, I don't know if you're aware, but OSHA is taking a stance. They're now doing riding rounds. They're riding around neighborhoods. They're riding around job sites. They're actually looking at small contractors on job sites to see who's abiding by the rules.
Yeah.
They're looking for fall protection. They're looking for guards going up. They're looking for all these things. And yeah, these things can slow down the job some. They can, and it can be costly. But in today's world, you've got to deal with this stuff. And otherwise, Clay, does anybody want to live through what you lived through?
Jerry, that brings up a really good point that I think the understanding, I was the same way. I didn't like OSHA people. I thought it was a bunch of crap. I didn't really enjoy understanding about OSHA situations. I knew what some of the regulations were, but today I have a discipline. It's for your protection. It's for your employees' protection. If you lose an eye and it's your eye, it makes a whole lot more important than somebody else's. If you lose a finger, an arm, or you're punctured or impaled on fencing, or you die because the ladder wasn't whatever, or if it was ladder or scaffolding. But we have too much in our industry. And I applaud when somebody forces us to do a little better job. I didn't years ago, but now I do. I want to hear more of it. I hope that, like Cheryl said, I hope I can tell one more person how important it is to have standards that your employees understand it. You want them to be safe, but you got to be willing to do something about it if they're not going to play along with it. Are you going to dismiss them? Are you going to fine them? Are you going to let them off for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks? What are you going to do about it? It can't be a threat. It's got to be a promise.
There you go. So when you see somebody post on the internet that they've had an accident, that something like this has happened, what goes through your head?
First off, I want to call. And Chris called me the other week, and he said, "Can I talk?" I said, "Sure." And mine is, and I've talked to a couple of people late at night, 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, trying to figure out what they need to do. And my first thing is, again, just like I told Jim Brewer, get an attorney, lawyer up. Because, and I'll say it 1,000 times, anything you say can and will be used against you. It will be. And it'll be twisted. So you've got to make sure. And we just found out attorneys have no right, or investigators have no right to allow the employee to be taken to another area and interviewed without attorney representation. Evidently, that's not legal. And there's going to be a big spill out about that. Also, I think it's coming too. Because they want as much disinformation as they can gather to use against you.
Yeah. So Cheryl, you got anything else you would add to this?
No, I'm good with it. I just want to see things change and improve.
Yeah. Josh, you got anything to add to this?
No, but I'll be adding call a lawyer and
Yes.
to the SOP, and don't talk to the investigator.
Josh,
without
may
the
I
employer.
want to
Yeah.
interrupt you, Josh. I'm going to say, don't lose this. Everyone should have on their contacts an attorney that deals with OSHA and workers' comp. There's specialties that do it. Your guy that did the real estate closing isn't the one you want to call because
No.
he's going to refer to send you somebody else. You should find out who's already doing this. And they're listed. You can find them on doing some research. They're reviewed like anybody else. Like Google does things on Amazon that, raise and stars. They get stars too for being good and cooperative and helpful. Did you like that guy or not? But I think it's wise to have them in your contact form to pick up your phone. I
Yep,
had my free
absolutely.
question. Call your attorney now. And his attorney was in Europe. I said, call him anyway. And he did. He picked him up in Europe and answered phone, came in Thursday and dealt with the whole thing. And it's interesting when he did how the investigator's attitude changed when he saw an attorney being involved like this so early, involved with it. You don't want to wait. That whole thing, lawyer up, I'm going to tell you, lawyer up. Your life, your limb, your family, your house, your business, everything's involved with it.
Is that for any workplace injury or fatality?
If you're asking me, I've had many of injuries where we'd go to the hospital. I don't have any problem with it. But let's say it's a broken back or an eye puncture. You probably want to do something. But you judge the degree of difficulty. What would you do?
Loss of limb or life.
Yes. What would you do if it was your son and he was on the ladder and fell off and got in plane? What would you do? And Chris was really interesting. He got his guy an attorney. He got him an attorney to represent him, the guy. That's what I thought was admirable. That he was that serious about his OSHA and workers' comp stuff. Very seriously.
Yep.
Did I answer your question, buddy? Gosh.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, so, I mean, as a minimum, loss of limb or life
Yes.
or function, I would say too, or sort of,
Yeah.
you lost the ability to hear.
Yeah.
Things
Well, Clay, I want
Yeah.
to thank you again. Like I said, it took me quite a few years to get you up to do this the first time. And now you're able to talk about it, which I knew you would. Once you did your first one, I knew it would be easier for you to talk about.
it will never be a brag tag. It'll be something that has to help somebody else.
Right. So I remember whenever Jim Brewer had the fatality, you were one of the people that he reached out to at that point, weren't you?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, that's the whole thing. We have an industry that has a tremendous network of people that are willing to help you.
Yes.
That's what we've been doing. That's our whole mission here at our company in CVC Success Group of what we do. We help people. We help them get through these things. And usually that's what we do. We try to find subject matter experts that we can involve whenever these problems come up. So, brother,
Jerry, I want to say something to you too. If anybody has another incident, it's like the severity of it. They think they just want to talk about it. First off, get your Rolodex. Rolodex, how's that? That age defies me. Get your contacts out. Make that. But you should have an action plan right away. And Josh, I really like what you said. How you do you have one now? Well, you said earlier, and I think it's admirable statement. And I think that I hope everybody hears that, and it should include your attorney's number.
that's it. That's what you call the war plan, and it's
Yes, you're right. You
Thank
do
you.
remember that, don't you, Jerry?
yeah, it goes back to our mixed group days, Clay, because that was a question you always asked when you were the moderator. What's your war plan? I still remember you said at the head of the table. What's your war plan if this goes on? But it really truly is. This is something that can wreck your emotional health, your financial health, and whenever it happens, you got to be ready. That's what Joshua was just talking. He's learned from this interview today some things to add in the SOPs for people when he builds their SOPs. So I appreciate you sharing your wisdom with us. If you've listened to this episode, hey, I want to thank you. It's always an honor. It's a privilege. And it's a pleasure to be able to speak to people in this manner. We have a pile of people watching our replays every single week. This will be up on the replay. I posted the link to the last interview with Clay.
That was great, Jerry.
Yeah, I strongly suggest you to go listen to that interview. I will guarantee you, if you listen to that previous interview, you're going to find things that will just shake you all to pieces. And because that was what happened to me when we did that interview, Clay, because it was actually the first time that I ever knew exactly what had happened in this fatality, because you weren't talking about it. So anyway, we appreciate you joining this week as always. Plan to be with us next Friday, every Friday, 12 noon Eastern time. We try to bring you a broadcast, a presentation that we hope will be of value to you and help you take your business to your dreams and help you get your personal dreams also in your life. So appreciate you being here. We'll see you next week on the next episode of the CVC